of Illinois.
Well, thank you, Chairman,
There you
and
go.
there we go. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ranking Member. Today, this has been a very informative day, really all over the place around higher speed rail and high speed rail. And I have some macro questions, and then if anyone wants to elaborate behind them, and they're focused at Mr. Porcari, Mr. Washington, and Mr. Coons, because I would like a macro level look at it, but also perhaps Mr. Washington could give us a more of a micro level look at it. And so it's fairly simple. So in my district, well, ironically, I have more lines of track than any other district in our nation. We have several transportation deserts. It's fascinating, right? And they have to do with connecting commuter lines so people can get from point A to B. There are these big gaps where shift workers have to walk for several miles across counties or string together bus, rail, walking, and other. And we've come up with some unique solutions. There's some public transit on demand ideas, what have you. But what would solve that is some higher speed rail programs that were very short in nature, like less than 20 miles of a stretch. And I can think of 2 or 3 areas where literally thousands of folks go from point A to B that are shift workers that would really benefit from high speed rail. There's also some wide open spaces. Now, I know that we have NEPA regulations that, phase 1 and beginning of phase 2, very tough with regard to displacement and finding the space and all of that. There's no shortage of issues. But the question then becomes, how expensive is it to not do this? How hard is it on the environment to not do this? And how deadly is it to not do this? And my question for Mr. Porcari, I'll start with him, is that has it been studied the impact of not doing higher speed rail and high speed rail?
It's a great question, Congresswoman, and there is certainly an opportunity cost in not doing this work. And you're seeing some of that, some of those calculations being done by metropolitan planning organizations around the country right now on different modal choices. And for example, adding commuter rail, adding better transit service, what that means in environmental terms. And it's very project specific, obviously. But if you look at the growth of the country on a long-term basis, it's clear that we need to balance our transportation system with better rail choices, with both new and emerging technologies, if we're going to do it. And in environmental terms, if you look, for example, at California's cap and trade program, emissions reductions and the drive towards emissions reductions are changing policies around the states. And so that I believe that's something you're going to see more states doing in the future because of those avoided emissions.
Thank you. And then if Mr. Coons or Mr. Washington have any other comments, I have one more quick question after that, but if either of you want to contribute, I'd love to hear.
Yes, very quickly. How expensive is it to not do it? I think we can quantify that in lives lost on our highway system. And I think when I think about a system and moving people, you mentioned 20 miles. This is ideal for a light rail system. We are building many much track of light rail systems here in Los Angeles County. And I think about the systems that go directly into our nation's airports as well. There could be, 50, maybe 100,000 people working at some of our larger airports, and trains get a big portion of them to that airport. I think the last thing I would point to is the environment, how we want to live. We know that transportation is the biggest emitter of pollution. And so how expensive is it not to do this? I would measure that in lives.
Thank you. And Mr. Coons, if you have anything to share.
Yes, thank you for that question, Congresswoman. The other big thing that hasn't been mentioned is the cost of people's time and waste sitting stuck in traffic or stuck in airports. it's estimated to be several $100 billion a year. And then as a business person, time is money. So if all your people are taking all day to get anywhere, your entire company is less competitive, especially against nations that actually have these efficient systems, and then they can outcompete us.
Well, good, thank you. And rather than do my next question, I just would like to enter for the record that I suggest at both the city metropolitan level and at the DOT level, and I'll share this with the Secretary of Transportation, that we stop quibbling about whether it should or should not be done and all of the stumbling blocks, because there are prior issues attached to this. There are NEPA challenges, there are construction challenges, there are everything. I think we have to start coming together and thinking about how we get this done and not why it should or shouldn't be done, because it's clear it needs to be done. And then I will say one final thing. There's no better reason to do it rather than to create opportunity to make our environment cleaner and healthier and to save lives. So I'm hoping that when I do have my meeting with Secretary Buttigieg, that we can just move forward on getting this done and figure it out.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Your time has expired, but I agree, and I think it's important to just point out in that regard that Judge, you were complaining about the process. They seem like very legitimate complaints you had with not being involved in the process. Of course, that was under the Trump administration that EIS was handled with the FRA. I think you'll find a different reception with the Biden administration. Okay, next on the list is my colleague from Indiana, Mr. Carson.